My name is Leah Anderson, and at 28 years old, I have become something of a ghost in my own family. To most people, the Andersons are the picture of success. My parents, Harold and Evelyn, built their reputation on charm, appearances, and the ability to glide effortlessly through Chicago's social circles. My father was once a respected investment manager before an early retirement, while my mother devoted her life to orchestrating charity events and garden club luncheons. They're the sort of couple that never misses a gala and whose names always seem to find their way into the society section of the local paper. Then there's my siblings. Daniel, the firstborn, is everything a son is supposed to be. He's a high-powered attorney with a sharp jawline and a reputation to match. My father beams when introducing him. This is my son, Daniel, one of the best legal minds in the city. And Michelle, my sister, followed in our mother's idealized footsteps, becoming the pediatrician Evelyn always wanted to be. At family dinners, my mother practically glows while bragging, "Michelle just saved another child's life this week. Isn't she remarkable?" And then there's me. Leah. The mistake child, as my father once let slip after too many bourbons. I chose design, art, creativity, things my family never valued because they didn't come with Ivy League degrees or prestigious titles. Art is a hobby, not a career, my father used to tell me, his voice dripping with disdain. You'll learn the hard way. You're just different, my mother would say, in that careful, patronizing tone. We worry about you, sweetheart. Different. That word always landed like a knife. I moved out the moment I turned 18. Unlike Daniel and Michelle, who were ushered into fully furnished apartments with their tuition paid in full, I juggled 3 jobs to put myself through school. I worked mornings at a coffee shop, evenings cleaning offices, and weekends freelancing design work on a beat-up laptop. I lived on instant noodles and 4 hours of sleep. I fainted from exhaustion once and ended up in the ER. I still never asked my parents for a dime. Pride, I suppose. Pride and survival. Ironically, all that different determination paid off. By my late 20s, I had built a design firm in downtown Chicago that employed 25 talented creatives. We branded tech startups, designed campaigns for national companies, and even got our work displayed in Times Square once. Last year, we cleared over 7 figures in profit. By any objective measure, I had succeeded. But in the Anderson household, my achievements vanished like smoke. At gatherings, my parents would introduce Daniel with his job title, Michelle with hers, and then, with the faintest pause, say simply, "And this is Leah." No mention of my company. No acknowledgement of my accomplishments. Just Leah. The extra one. Still, despite the slights, despite the years of being dismissed, some part of me still wanted connection. Not approval anymore, I had built a life without their help, but something deeper. Family, even if fractured, still mattered to me. So when my parents announced they were planning a lavish 35th wedding anniversary ball at one of Chicago's historic mansions, I told myself, this could be it. The moment we finally turn a corner. I even bought them a gift, not another anonymous check, but something personal, 2 tickets for a European river cruise, a trip they had dreamed about for years but never taken. $8,000, packaged in a velvet-lined box with a handwritten card. I wrapped it myself, choosing silver paper with a navy ribbon to match the gown I planned to wear. As I placed the gift on my dresser that morning, my reflection caught my eye in the mirror. I saw a confident woman in sapphire silk, hair swept into an elegant chignon, makeup subtle yet polished. For a moment, I believed, truly believed, that tonight might be the night I was finally seen for who I had become. The truth is, my family had been living on a quiet lifeline for years, a lifeline I provided. They never asked me outright, of course. Asking would have meant acknowledging I had something to give. Instead, they floated along as if their comfortable life simply continued by magic, never once wondering where the money came from. It started with my parents' property taxes. 3 years ago, after my father's early retirement, they confided, not to me, but to a cousin at a family barbecue, that they were falling behind. Their dream house, in Lincoln Park, with its manicured lawn and 3-car garage, was becoming a financial burden. I overheard Evelyn whispering about refinancing, about the shame of possibly downsizing. That night, I set up an automatic payment, $3,200 every month, disguised as a retirement supplement. They never questioned it. They simply assumed some long-forgotten pension had finally kicked in. Then came Daniel. My brother, the golden child, the pride of Harold Anderson's life. Few people knew that behind his pristine lawyer image, he was drowning. Gambling. Poker nights that turned into high-stakes weekends. The kind of debts that attract people you don't want knocking on your door. I stepped in through a lawyer I trusted, arranging a payoff of $70,000 under the guise of a negotiated settlement. Daniel never knew it was me. To this day, he thinks he simply caught a break. Michelle was next. My mother's darling, the daughter who never made a wrong choice. But when she fell ill last year and her insurance refused to cover an experimental treatment, she was cornered. I created a fictitious grant program for advancing women in medicine and funneled $35,000 to her. She sent the grant administrator a thank you note, never realizing the administrator's office address was my firm's. And through it all, I stayed silent. No credit. No acknowledgement. My name wasn't attached to a single payment. I told myself it was better that way, that generosity without recognition was nobler. But sometimes, in the quiet of night, I wondered if the truth was simpler. I was afraid they would find a way to twist it, to diminish it, to make it small. Meanwhile, I built my own life. My design firm, Lumina Creative, had grown from a laptop in a studio apartment to an office suite overlooking the Chicago River. We branded campaigns for tech startups, curated digital experiences for Fortune 500 clients, and even partnered with a national retailer for a holiday ad campaign that landed on a Times Square billboard. I had everything I once dreamed of: independence, success, respect from my peers. Yet none of it seemed to shift the narrative inside my family's walls. To them, Daniel and Michelle were achievers. I was just Leah. And so I tried, in my own way, to bridge the distance. I sent thoughtful gifts for birthdays, volunteered to host holiday dinners, and even forced myself into small talk with Evelyn during her endless retellings of Michelle's accomplishments. I kept hoping, perhaps naively, that if I gave enough, if I showed up enough, I might earn a place at the table. The anniversary ball felt like the perfect chance. My parents had mentioned it in passing, lamenting how expensive venues had become. I quietly contacted the event planner myself, offering to cover half of the costs. My condition was simple: credit the entire family equally. That way Daniel and Michelle could share in the gesture without feeling overshadowed. My share alone came to $20,000, the catering, the decor, part of the ballroom rental. I didn't mind. For once, I wanted to give openly, even if they didn't know the extent of my contribution. And because I still believed in second chances, maybe even in miracles, I went one step further. I booked a European river cruise, 2 weeks along the Danube, with excursions prepaid, castles in Austria, wine tastings in Hungary, music in Vienna. $8,000 I could easily afford, but more than that, an offering of peace. I imagined my parents unwrapping the gift, tears in their eyes, realizing their different daughter had thought of them so deeply. For the first time in years, I felt excited about a family event. I pressed my gown, polished my shoes, and nestled the velvet box in silver wrapping. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment my family would see me not as the mistake, not as the afterthought, but as someone who belonged. I convinced myself of it so completely that I ignored the warning signs. The abrupt pauses in family group chats. The hushed phone calls that stopped when I entered the room. The way Daniel and Michelle sometimes exchanged glances when I mentioned the party. I told myself I was imagining things. That old insecurities were clouding my judgment. That after years of exclusion, I was paranoid. I didn't know it then, but those small signs weren't paranoia at all. They were the truth whispering at the edges. A truth I wouldn't fully grasp until I stood in the doorway of that grand Chicago mansion, staring at a crowd of familiar faces, and realizing I wasn't supposed to be there at all. The night of the anniversary ball, I arrived early. Too early, maybe, but I wanted a moment to breathe before the swirl of champagne flutes and polite laughter began. The mansion loomed above me, its limestone facade glowing under the golden wash of spotlights. I handed my keys to the valet and smoothed the folds of my sapphire gown as if pressing down nerves. Inside, the air smelled of roses and polished wood. A hostess in a sleek black dress greeted me with a tablet in hand. "Good evening. Name, please?" "Anderson," I said, smiling. "I'm here for the Anderson anniversary celebration." "Leah Anderson." Her manicured finger slid across the screen. Then again, slower. Her forehead creased. "I'm sorry, Ms. Anderson, I don't see your name on the list." For a moment, I thought she was joking. It must be a mistake. "I'm Harold and Evelyn's daughter." She gave me a look I'd seen 1,000 times before, that polite, pitying glance reserved for people who don't belong. "I'll check again." Her finger flicked downward once more, then she shook her head. "No, I'm sorry. You're not listed as a guest." Something cold coiled in my stomach. "That's impossible." Behind her, through the grand doorway, I caught sight of the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above linen-draped tables. Guests in evening wear mingled around a champagne tower. At the center, I saw them, my parents. Harold in his charcoal suit, Evelyn radiant in a silver gown, laughing beside Daniel and Michelle. My siblings looked picture-perfect with their spouses at their sides. All of them already gathered, 20 minutes before the official start time. My heart thudded. If this was a surprise for me, no one had bothered to let me in on it. If it wasn't, then what? "I'll just go in," I said, stepping past the hostess. "Ms. Anderson," she began, but I was already moving toward the laughter. The first to see me was my mother. Her smile faltered mid-sentence, her hand flying to touch Harold's arm. He turned, and the warmth on his face evaporated, replaced by a cold stare that could freeze rivers. Conversations nearby tapered off as heads turned in my direction. "Leah," he said, his voice sharp enough to slice the air. "What are you doing here?" I clutched the silver-wrapped gift box tighter. "It's your anniversary," I said, my voice thinner than I wanted. "Why wouldn't I be here?" Evelyn stepped forward, her expression tightening into that practiced society smile. "Sweetheart, we didn't expect you. This is just a gathering for close family and friends." The word struck me like a slap. Close family. My mother had drawn a circle, and I was standing outside of it. Daniel avoided my gaze, his jaw tense. Michelle pretended to be fascinated by her manicure. Not one of them stepped forward to bridge the silence. "There must be a mistake," I said again, though even as the words left my lips, I knew there was none. "I even helped with the arrangements." Harold's eyes darkened. "There is no mistake. You weren't invited." Gasps rippled among the guests. I felt their stares, the weight of their curiosity pressing against my skin. Evelyn fiddled with the pearls at her throat, a nervous habit she'd had since I was a child. Daniel took a slow sip of champagne. Michelle's husband leaned closer to whisper in her ear. "I'm your daughter," I whispered, though the room was so quiet everyone could hear. "How can I not be invited?" "This event is for the people who matter," Harold said, his tone low but clear. "The people who are actually part of our lives. Not someone who drifts in when it suits her." I wanted to scream. I had been the one calling, visiting, sending gifts. I had been the one wiring thousands every month to keep them afloat. And now, in front of friends and colleagues, I was being painted as a stranger. "This isn't fair," I managed. "I've been trying." "Not tonight," Evelyn cut in, her voice sugar-coated venom. "Please, Leah. Don't make a scene." I held out the gift box anyway, the velvet case with cruise tickets inside. "I brought you something." She didn't reach for it. "You can leave it with the others." She gestured vaguely toward a corner table stacked with parcels. The box suddenly felt heavy in my hands. Heavier still was the silence that followed, the rejection wrapped in polite smiles and downcast eyes. "I think you should go," Harold said finally, his voice louder now. "This is embarrassing for everyone." "Embarrassing?" My voice cracked. "I'm embarrassing to you?" "You always were," he snapped, his mask slipping. "Always dramatic. Always demanding attention." He turned to a security guard hovering near the door. "Escort her out." The guard hesitated, glancing between us. "Sir, she says she's your daughter." "Get this mistake child out of here," Harold barked. "She doesn't belong." The words hung in the air like shards of glass. Mistake child. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed into their drink. My vision blurred, but I stood tall. "It's fine," I told the guard, forcing my voice steady. "I'll see myself out." I set the gift on the table, lifted my chin, and walked past the staring eyes. Each step felt like dragging chains, but I refused to let them see me run. It wasn't until I reached my car, the mansion shrinking in my rearview mirror, that the tears came, hot, unrelenting, years of rejection condensed into one brutal night. And beneath the humiliation, something colder began to take shape. Not just pain. Not just grief. But clarity. If they truly believed I didn't belong, then maybe it was time I stopped pretending I did. I don't remember the drive home. Chicago's lights blurred into streaks as I gripped the steering wheel, my father's words replaying like a cruel echo, "Mistake child, she doesn't belong." By the time I pulled into my driveway, my makeup had melted into black rivers and my throat burned raw from holding back sobs. Inside my townhouse, I kicked off my heels and stood barefoot in the foyer, still clutching my clutch purse like a lifeline. Everything felt strangely quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your skin. I carried myself into the kitchen, uncorked a bottle of red wine, and poured a glass too full to be elegant. I sank into my leather office chair, opened my laptop, and for the first time in years, I let the truth flood through me. I had spent my adult life silently funding the very people who humiliated me. I had covered their bills, their mistakes, their luxuries, all while they paraded around pretending I was the family disappointment. That night, in the aftermath of my father's rejection, the scales fell from my eyes. I wasn't their daughter. I was their safety net. The banking portal loaded with a soft chime. My cursor hovered over the monthly transfers. $3,200 sent to Harold and Evelyn every month for property taxes. For 3 years. That was nearly $115,000 they had received, believing it to be some forgotten pension. With a few clicks, I canceled it. A message popped up, recurring transfer terminated. Next, I opened the folder I had labeled Family Support. It contained the contracts I had arranged through lawyers and third parties, the invisible hands I had used to funnel money without leaving fingerprints. Michelle's medical grant, with $35,000 allocated and $12,000 still pending. Cancelled. Daniel's settlement forgiveness plan, with monthly installments still scheduled. Terminated. I scrolled further. Service contracts. A landscaping crew for my parents' yard, a cleaning service twice a week, even their meal delivery plan. All set up through my accounts. Each cancelled with a swift, cold efficiency. Finally, the event itself. I found the invoice from the planner, $20,000, already half paid. I dialed the number. "Hello, this is Amanda," the planner answered cheerfully, no doubt still managing the ball. "This is Leah Anderson," I said evenly. "Oh, Leah. I thought I'd see you tonight. Is everything okay?" "There's been a change. I'm withdrawing my contribution." A pause. "But Leah, the event is happening right now. Then the remainder will need to be charged to someone else." I don't think that's how. It is tonight." My voice had an edge even I didn't recognize. "Charge Harold Anderson. Or Daniel. Or Michelle. I'm done." The call ended. I drained my wine. In less than an hour, I had dismantled over $160,000 of hidden support. My family's financial safety net unraveled thread by thread. For years, I had convinced myself this giving was love. That by paying their bills, I was buying my way into acceptance. But love never demanded anonymity. Love never erased your name from guest lists. I shut the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling as the silence pressed in again. For the first time in decades, I felt something shift inside me. A hard clarity. I wasn't just cutting off money. I was cutting the strings that bound me to their approval. It felt like grief. Heavy, raw, unrelenting. But under the grief, something else stirred, a strange, dangerous kind of freedom. I poured another glass of wine, carried it upstairs, and ran a bath. As I sank into the steaming water, I pictured the ballroom still glittering across town. The music, the champagne, the laughter continuing as if I had never existed. But this time, I didn't feel like the ghost. For the first time, it was them who were living in the illusion. And me? I was finally awake. My phone began buzzing before midnight. At first, I ignored it, curling deeper into my bed with a damp towel wrapped around my hair and the dull ache of wine in my temples. But the calls kept coming, one after another, until the vibration rattled against the nightstand like a frantic heartbeat. By morning, I had 29 missed calls, 11 voicemails, and countless text messages. The first voicemail was from my father. His voice was sharp, slurred, tinged with champagne. "Leah, the venue says there's a payment issue. Fix this immediately. Call me back." The second came an hour later, more clipped, more desperate. "What the hell do you think you're doing? They're demanding another 20 grand. Do you want to humiliate us? Fix this now." By the third, around 2 in the morning, the fury gave way to threats. "If this isn't resolved by morning, Leah, there will be consequences. Do you hear me? Consequences." The text messages followed a pattern. Evelyn began with pleading, "Sweetheart, I don't understand what's happening. The venue says the card was declined. Please don't ruin this night for us." Then came the guilt, "Your father is upset. Michelle is in tears. Is this really what you want?" Daniel's messages were more blunt. "What the hell, Leah? Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. He's pacing like a madman. You need to grow up." Michelle's arrived last, around dawn. "The mortgage company just called. Something about the automatic payments being cancelled." "What are you doing?" I sat at my kitchen counter, sipping coffee, scrolling through the avalanche of demands and guilt trips, and felt nothing. Or maybe not nothing. Something colder. Detached. Like I was reading the drama of strangers. At 9 o'clock, I dressed, straightened my blazer, and drove to my office. My company, my employees, my clients, didn't stop existing because my family had imploded overnight. If anything, the normalcy steadied me. Meetings were held, deadlines reviewed, campaigns approved. Life went on. Around noon, my assistant knocked on my door. "Leah," she said cautiously, "your father is here. He says he won't leave until he sees you." A knot formed in my stomach, but my voice stayed calm. "Tell him I'm in a meeting and unavailable." 15 minutes later, the door to my office burst open. Harold Anderson, my father, the man who once seemed so untouchable, stood there, rumpled and hollow-eyed. His tie was loose, his hair mussed, his skin sallow from lack of sleep. He looked nothing like the polished patriarch of the night before. "Leah," he said, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk." I remained seated behind my desk. "This is my workplace. You can't just barge in." "You left me no choice," he snapped, though his tone lacked conviction. "You won't answer your phone. What have you done?" I set my pen down, folded my hands. "I stopped paying for a family that doesn't want me." His jaw tightened. "This is childish revenge. Your mother is beside herself. The mortgage company called this morning. The landscaper says services are terminated. What are you trying to prove? I'm not proving anything. My voice was steady, even. I'm finished funding people who call me a mistake child in front of their friends. People who invite everyone but me. People who throw me out of a party I helped pay for. Color rose in his cheeks. You embarrassed us. I embarrassed you? I cut in. No, Dad. You embarrassed yourself. You called security on your own daughter. You called me a mistake. All while drinking champagne I paid for. For the first time, he faltered. His mouth opened, then closed again. He looked suddenly smaller, as if the weight of years had settled all at once on his shoulders. Finally, he whispered, "We can't afford the mortgage without you." Then sell the house, I said. Downsize. Or ask Daniel. Or Michelle. I'm sure your successful children would be glad to help. They can't, he admitted quietly, almost shamefully. They don't have what you do. I stood, gathering my things. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you treated me like I didn't belong. I have a meeting. You need to leave. His eyes searched mine, desperate, almost pleading. We're still your parents. I paused at the door. Yes. And that will never change. But being parents doesn't entitle you to my money. Or my silence. I opened the door, motioned for my assistant to escort him out. He didn't resist. He shuffled past her like a man who had lost not just a fight, but the armor he'd worn his entire life. As the door clicked shut behind him, I sank into my chair, my pulse racing, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar weight of power. For the first time in my life, I had stood toe-to-toe with Harold Anderson. And I hadn't flinched. 3 days passed in uneasy quiet. The torrent of messages slowed, replaced by a trickle of cautious texts. Can we talk? Please call us. This isn't how family should be. I didn't answer. My boundaries were new, fragile, and I wasn't about to dismantle them so soon. On the 4th day, just after lunch, my assistant knocked gently on my office door. Leah, she whispered, your family is here. My pen froze mid-signature. My family? All of them, she said, her eyes wide. Your parents, your brother, your sister. They're in the lobby and refusing to leave. I inhaled slowly, forcing the air into my lungs. My clients in the conference room glanced over curiously. With a professional smile, I excused myself and stepped into the hall. The sight stopped me cold. There they were, Harold by the reception desk, Evelyn perched on the edge of a chair with trembling hands, Daniel pacing near the windows, Michelle staring at the award plaques on the wall. For a moment, the scene felt surreal. My family invading my professional sanctuary, the place I had built without them. This is my workplace, I said firmly. Whatever this is, it could have waited. We tried, Daniel said sharply. You've been dodging us for days. I've been working, I replied. Some of us have businesses to run. My father stepped forward, his voice weary. Leah, we need to resolve this as a family. Not here, I snapped. My employees were pretending not to watch, but I could feel their eyes on us. If you want to talk, we do it privately. I pointed to a small glass-walled conference room. Wait there. 15 minutes. That's all I'll give you. When I finally joined them, the air was thick with tension. I didn't sit. I stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. You have 30 minutes. Speak. Harold cleared his throat, trying for authority but sounding brittle. We need to discuss the financial arrangements you, apparently had in place. There's nothing to discuss, I said flatly. I was helping the family. Now I'm not. It's simple. But why keep it secret? Evelyn asked, her eyes red-rimmed. Why not tell us you were paying our mortgage? I met her gaze without flinching. Would it have changed anything? Would you have respected my career? Stopped introducing me as just Leah while praising Daniel and Michelle? Would you have invited me to your anniversary ball instead of treating me like an outsider? Silence. Heavy. Guilty. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. So this is punishment? For not inviting you? No, I shot back. This is consequences. For years of dismissal. For calling me a mistake child in front of 100 people. For all of you standing by and saying nothing. Michelle spoke then, her voice sharp with defense. We didn't know you paid for the party. Would it have mattered? I cut her off. Would you have stopped my father from calling security? Or would you have stood there, silent, just like you always do? Their faces told me everything. I pressed on. Did you ever wonder how Mom and Dad could afford their life on his early retirement? The landscaping, the housekeepers, the weekend getaways? Daniel's brow furrowed. Michelle's lips parted. They hadn't wondered. Not once. And your debts, I continued coldly. Daniel, the gambling loans that vanished. Michelle, the medical bills that magically got covered. Did you think the universe just blessed you with good luck? Understanding dawned, slow and sickly. That was you? Daniel asked, his voice hushed. All of it, I said. Over $200,000 in 3 years. And you never once looked my way. Evelyn gasped softly, covering her mouth. Harold sat back, his face pale. Why? He asked finally. Why would you give so much if you felt we didn't appreciate you? Because that's what family is supposed to do, I said, my throat tight. Support each other. Even when it hurts. Even when it isn't reciprocated. I kept hoping one day you'd see me. That I'd be enough. For the first time, Evelyn's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I never meant to make you feel less. But you did, I said, my voice low but steady. Every time you dismissed my work as a hobby. Every time you introduced Daniel and Michelle with pride and reduced me to silence. Every time you excluded me from family decisions. And then the anniversary. I trailed off, unable to finish. The image of Harold's sneer, of his voice calling me a mistake, was too raw. He rubbed his face with both hands. We didn't invite you because, he faltered. Because your mother was worried. Worried about what? I demanded. Evelyn's voice cracked as she admitted that you'd outshine us. That people would see how successful you've become and wonder why we never talk about you. The words cut deeper than any insult. I had thought they were ashamed of me. I never imagined the truth was jealousy. So you excluded me, I said, almost to myself. Because I was too successful. Evelyn nodded, sobbing now. Harold stared at the table, silent. I exhaled, steadying myself. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm not restarting payments. I've done my part. If you want to keep the house, ask Daniel. Ask Michelle. I'm done. Michelle shook her head quickly. We can't afford it. That's not my problem, I said firmly. Not anymore. I walked to the door, hand on the knob. You made your choices. I've made mine. Behind me, my family sat in silence, the weight of my words settling over them like ash. For the first time in my life, I had drawn the line. And for once, they were the ones left on the other side. In the days that followed the confrontation in my office, the silence from my family was deafening. No more midnight calls. No more angry texts. Just a hollow quiet, as if they were regrouping, recalibrating, trying to decide how to approach me now that the old dynamic had shattered. 2 weeks passed before the first olive branch appeared. It came not from my parents, but from Daniel. His text was short, coffee? Just us. I almost ignored it. Old instincts told me his concern would be performative, that he'd find a way to twist the conversation back to his own grievances. But curiosity, and maybe the tiniest flicker of hope, made me type back, tomorrow. Noon. Green Line Cafe. When I arrived, he was already there, 2 steaming cups on the table. "I got you a caramel latte," he said, almost shyly. "You still drink those, right?" The fact that he remembered startled me. I sat, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. "Thanks." For a while, we talked about nothing: work, the weather, traffic. Then his tone shifted. "I need to say something. I should have spoken up at the party. I should have said it was wrong to throw you out." "Why didn't you?" I asked quietly. He stared into his coffee. "Because it was easier not to. I've always been the golden child, Leah. That role comes with rules. You don't question mom and dad. You keep the peace. You play along." I did what I've always done, stayed silent. I studied him. For the first time, I didn't see the polished attorney, the perfect son. I saw someone trapped in expectations, just as I had been, only in a different way. "I always envied you," he admitted suddenly. I almost laughed. "Envied me? Why?" "Because you had the courage to walk away. To build something of your own. I wanted to study music in college, did you know that? Piano performance. But Dad shut it down before I even applied. Law school was the only option. I've built this career, this image, and half the time, I hate it." He exhaled shakily. "Meanwhile, you built something you love. Something that's yours." And I stood there acting superior, when really, I admired you. The confession disarmed me. We ended up talking for nearly 3 hours, peeling back layers of a relationship we'd never really examined. For once, Daniel wasn't the flawless son, and I wasn't the mistake child. We were just 2 siblings, fumbling toward honesty. Michelle's outreach came a week later, though her approach was less humble. She invited me to lunch at a glossy downtown bistro, sliding into the booth across from me with her usual air of control. "I wanted to explain," she began, her fork already spearing greens. "We were raised to respect mom and dad's decisions. You were always different. Always challenging everything. I thought distancing was what they wanted." "That doesn't excuse standing silent while Dad called me a mistake," I said sharply. She had the grace to wince. "No, it doesn't. That was wrong. I should have said something." Over the course of the meal, her defensiveness softened. She admitted that she, too, had leaned on the family narrative: Leah, the impractical dreamer, the odd one out. "It was easier when you were struggling," she confessed. "It fit the story. But when you started succeeding, it threatened everything." Suddenly, the roles didn't make sense anymore. I didn't forgive her on the spot. But I could see the cracks forming in her armor, the first signs of self-awareness. Evelyn came next. One Sunday afternoon, she showed up at my door alone, her polished exterior noticeably faded. Without her pearls and coiffed hair, she seemed smaller, older. We sat in my living room, tea cooling between us, the silence thick. Finally, she spoke. "The house is under contract. We're moving to a condo closer to town. It's a relief, honestly. The house was too much." I nodded, saying nothing. She twisted her hands in her lap. "I've been thinking about why I treated you the way I did. Why I allowed your father to dismiss you. The truth is, I was jealous." The word hit like a stone. "You chased your dreams," she whispered, tears welling. "I gave up mine. I wanted to be a doctor once, but I married your father instead. And every time you succeeded without us, it felt like a judgment on my choices. It was easier to diminish you than face my own regrets." I swallowed hard. "I never judged you, Mom. I just wanted the freedom to be myself." She reached for my hand, her grip trembling. "And you did it. You became everything I wasn't brave enough to be. I am proud of you, Leah. Truly." Her honesty cracked something in me. For the first time in years, I felt compassion where resentment had lived. The hardest reconciliation came with Harold. He asked me to meet him in a park where we used to picnic when I was little. When I arrived, he was sitting stiffly on a bench, staring at the pond. "I've never been good at apologies," he said without looking at me. "Or admitting I'm wrong. But what I did at that party, it was unforgivable." "Then why do it?" I asked quietly. He sighed. "Pride. Fear. You walked in looking so self-assured, so successful. We deliberately excluded you. Being confronted with that, in front of everyone." I lashed out. "I called you a mistake because I couldn't control you. And what I can't control, I try to crush." The words stung, but they were honest. For the first time in my life, Harold Anderson wasn't the imposing figure in the charcoal suit. He was just a man, flawed and frightened. "I don't expect forgiveness," he finished. "But I'd like a chance to do better." I didn't give him an answer then. I simply nodded, the weight of years pressing heavy between us. Piece by piece, the fortress of denial my family had built began to crumble. For once, they were the ones reaching out, and I was the one deciding how far to let them in. 2 months after the disastrous anniversary ball, I found myself sitting at a modest dining table in my parents' new condo. The irony wasn't lost on me. Gone were the gilded chandeliers and marble floors of the Lincoln Park house, replaced by laminate counters and beige carpet that had seen better days. It was smaller, humbler, quieter. And somehow, it suited them. Daniel arrived first, bringing along a woman he introduced as Claire, a music teacher he'd recently started dating. Michelle came alone, explaining that her husband was home with the kids. My parents had prepared a simple meal: roast chicken, green beans, rolls from the local bakery. Nothing about the evening was glamorous. No guests, no champagne tower, no performance for the neighbors. For the first half hour, the conversation was tentative, like walking across thin ice. My mother asked about my business in a halting voice, as if afraid I'd snap. My father complimented the green beans twice, which struck me as both comical and sad. But as the meal wore on, something shifted. Daniel cracked a joke about how he'd once nearly been arrested in college for playing piano too loudly in the dorms, and even Harold chuckled. Michelle shared a story about her daughter's school play, and Evelyn's face softened with genuine pride. It wasn't perfect. There were pauses where the old discomfort crept in. But for the first time in years, I wasn't sitting at a table where my presence felt like an obligation. It felt tentative, fragile, but real. One thing was clear: I hadn't resumed financial support, and they hadn't asked me to. That absence hung in the air like a ghost, but it also marked a new boundary. Whatever we were building now, it wasn't transactional. After dinner, I lingered by the window while Claire played softly with Daniel's hand. The city stretched beyond us, glowing against the night sky. Evelyn joined me, holding 2 mugs of tea. "It's different here," she admitted, her voice low. "Smaller, yes. But maybe that's what we needed. A chance to breathe. To stop pretending." I nodded, sipping the tea. "Pretending takes energy." She glanced at me, her eyes shimmering. "I'm sorry for all the years I pretended with you." I didn't answer right away. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip. But I felt the weight of her words, heavier than the porcelain in my hands. Across the room, Harold cleared his throat. "Leah," he said, his tone awkward but sincere, "I've been looking at some of your company's work online. Impressive stuff." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd ever received from him. Not a glowing speech, not a headline, just a quiet nod toward who I really was. And it was enough. We ended the night with leftovers packed into foil and hugs that were stiff but no longer brittle. As I stepped into the cool night air, I realized something had shifted permanently. I wasn't going back to the girl who spent years funding their acceptance. I wasn't going to let myself be erased from the family photo. I was still cautious, still guarded. Trust had to be rebuilt brick by brick, and I wasn't sure how sturdy the foundation would ever be. But it was mine to choose. The power was no longer in their hands. Driving home, I thought about everything that had unfolded. The humiliation. The anger. The severing. And finally, this strange new beginning. For so long, I had equated family with sacrifice, with giving until I was empty, with hoping love could be bought if I just gave enough. But sitting at that modest condo table, I saw the truth. Family isn't about money. It isn't about titles or appearances. It isn't about who earns the spotlight and who gets left in the shadows. Family, when it's real, is about respect. About showing up honestly, even when it's uncomfortable. About choosing to see each other as we are, not as we wish each other to be. And for the first time in my life, I realized I could have that. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe not easily. But on my terms. As I pulled into my driveway, I cut the engine and sat in silence for a long moment, watching the lights of my home glow against the dark. For years, I had measured my worth against my parents' approval. But that night, for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anything from them. I already had what I needed. Weeks passed after that first dinner in the condo, and slowly, the edges of my family began to soften. Not all at once, change rarely comes like lightning, but in small, almost imperceptible ways. A text from Michelle about a funny thing her son had said. A photo from Daniel of a piano recital he finally attended, captioned, "Wish I'd done this years ago." Even my father, stiff and awkward as ever, sent me an article about design firms in Chicago with a scribbled note at the bottom, "Thought of you." It wasn't reconciliation in the fairy tale sense. No tearful speeches under chandeliers, no sudden erasure of decades of wounds. But it was something sturdier, more honest, a family learning to exist without roles that had once suffocated us all. I didn't return to funding them. That part of my life was closed. They sold the big house, downsized, and for the first time, began living within their means. And while there were still complaints, Evelyn missed her garden, Harold muttered about condo association rules, I sensed a strange relief in them. They no longer had to keep up appearances, no longer had to perform the perfect life. One Sunday afternoon, I met my mother for coffee. She stirred her latte slowly, her hands no longer adorned with sparkling rings. "Do you know what's strange?" she asked. "I feel lighter. Smaller house, fewer events, fewer bills. It's like shedding a costume I didn't realize I was wearing." I smiled faintly. Costumes can be heavy. She looked at me then, really looked. I wore mine for so long, I forgot what it felt like to be myself. "I'm sorry I forced one on you." The apology lingered in the air, fragile but real. Later that week, my father asked me to walk with him in the park near their condo. He was slower than I remembered, his once commanding stride tempered by age and humility. We sat on a bench by the pond, silence stretching between us. Finally, he said, "I've spent my life measuring worth by control. By appearances. You broke that. And I hated you for it." He paused, his eyes fixed on the water. But maybe I hated myself more. The words weren't easy for him, I knew. For Harold Anderson, this was as close to contrition as it might ever come. And strangely, it was enough. With Daniel, the change was more obvious. He started piano lessons again, rediscovering the dream he'd buried. He spoke more freely, less like the perfect son and more like a man finally writing his own script. Michelle struggled the most. She teetered between defensiveness and vulnerability, sometimes justifying the old family narrative, other times admitting how much she'd hidden behind it. Progress with her was jagged, but it was progress all the same. Through it all, I kept my boundaries intact. I didn't slip back into the role of provider. I didn't mute my voice to avoid conflict. And slowly, my family began to adjust to this new version of me, the version who didn't beg for approval, who didn't disappear into silence, who stood tall. One evening, months after the ball, we gathered again at my parents' condo for dinner. It was nothing extravagant, pasta, salad, cheap wine. At one point, Daniel made a self-deprecating joke about losing a case, and everyone laughed, including Harold. The sound was strange, unpracticed, but genuine. As I sat there, I realized something important. My family hadn't transformed overnight. They were still flawed, still carrying shadows of the old dynamics. But I wasn't sitting at that table seeking scraps of approval anymore. I was there by choice, not obligation. And that changed everything. Driving home that night, I rolled down the windows, letting the cool Chicago air wash over me. I thought back to the girl who had shown up at the mansion weeks earlier, clutching a gift box and praying to be seen. That girl had been desperate, willing to buy her way into love. But the woman I was now understood something deeper. Love that must be bought isn't love at all. Family, I had learned, isn't defined by money or appearances. It isn't about who can control the narrative or maintain the perfect facade. It's about respect, about honesty, about the willingness to face each other as we are. Sometimes, the most radical act of love is to step away, to set boundaries, to refuse to let yourself be diminished. That night, as I pulled into my driveway and saw the lights glowing warmly in my own windows, I knew I had finally reclaimed something I'd lost long ago. Not their approval. Not their validation. Myself. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories like this. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family or walk away from a toxic situation? Share your experience in the comments. Remember, you deserve respect and love exactly as you are.